Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned for my weekend reading report. It's my weekend reading report. It's the fantastic show where I talk about all the stuff that I read the previous week. And last week was terrible, so I didn't read as much as I would have liked. The previous week I did pretty well. Last week, no. Last week was pretty, well, it was awful. So I couldn't concentrate all that well on reading, unfortunately. But I read some things. I did read some things. So let's talk about the things that I read, the things I'm going to read, and some of the stuff that magically showed up here at the Manor. So what did I read last week? I finished one book. I read one book last week. It was for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club and June on the Range. It's June on the Range. It's finally here, June on the Range. The reading event devoted to reading Western fiction. And so, yeah, the first book I read was for both those things, and that was this. This is Zane Grey, The Lone Star Ranger. So this is the one book I completed this week. So on the 500 book challenge, the challenge where I must read 500 books that I own before I'll buy any new ones, this is number 51. So book number 51, starting that next 50. The Lone Star Ranger by Zane Grey. So this is the story about Buck Dwayne, the story of Buck Dwayne, who became an outlaw and then, through a set of very improbable circumstances, became a Texas Ranger. It's excellent. This was an excellent book. I actually really enjoyed this one, and it was a great way to start June on the Range. Now, for June on the Range, for those of you who would like to take part, for the full June on the Range experience, you read 4 Westerns. Unless you're reading a Western that's like really long, like Lonesome Dove. Then read Lonesome Dove, because that was awesome. But you read 4 Westerns. You read 1 by Zane Grey, you read 1 by Louis L'Amour, and then you read 2 by people that are not Louis L'Amour or Zane Grey. That's how you can get the whole experience. And this year's Zane Grey was fantastic. Really enjoyed it. It was, however, a little peculiar in certain ways. It had some odd moments. It had some subplots that were never resolved. It had a beginning half and a second half that didn't always feel like they matched up completely. There was a love interest in the beginning of this book who literally vanishes, and then you get another love interest at the end of this book, or towards the second half of this book. So there were some peculiarities about this book. The story of Buck Dwayne, but there's a reason for that. So this isn't the real story of Buck Dwayne, outlaw, who becomes a ranger. No, actually, that would be this. This is Zane Grey's Last of the Dwaynes. It's Zane Grey's Last of the Dwaynes. What the hell is going on here? These aren't the same book. Almost. You see, here's the thing. Zane Grey wrote this story called Last of the Dwaynes, and it was really popular. He published it in a magazine. I can't remember the name of the magazine, but it was really popular, and they made like 4 movies about it or something. It was really popular. So he expanded it into a novel. And despite all of his great success and the popularity of this story, don't even start. Don't even start. It's just some kid on a bicycle. Rhonda can't stand bicycles, or kids on bicycles, or kids, or other dogs, or anything that goes outside the window. Just let it be, Rhonda. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes, so despite his great success in the past and the popularity of the magazine version of this story, the publishers rejected Last of the Dwaynes. Why? Because it's too damn violent, that's why. They're like, man, this Buck Dwayne guy, he kills all kinds of people. This is like a bloodbath. It's like, you know, it's very violent, apparently. And so it was rejected. Too much gunplay, Zane Grey. Tone it down a little, will ya? And Zane Grey was like, what? He's an outlaw. Of course he shoots people. So this was rejected. And so he needed to get a book published. And he liked this story. He liked Buck Dwayne. So he did a weird thing. He took the first half of this book, and then he took the second half of another book, and he kind of squished them together into this kind of Frankenstein book. And then that second half of the other book, he added stuff from this book to make Buck Dwayne's character consistent. And we ended up with this book, The Lone Star Ranger, which was very popular and is actually a really good book. But this is actually the real book. And this book was not published until the 1990s. So this actually is not, I don't believe this is in the public domain. I could be wrong, but I don't know that it is. This one is, though. And so that's what Roger and I chose for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club. Because in Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, all the books you can get for free on Project Gutenberg. I have to see if this is available. I don't think it is. Because like I said, it was published in the 90s. Not published until the 1990s. And this edition is from Leisure Books. The late, great Leisure Books. And so I want to read this one like right away, knowing the story. And seeing how good this is, and that this is even more violent, and that this is the real story, it makes me want to pick up this like right now. But I'll probably will wait a bit before I read that. So that's the story of this. It's really supposed to be this, but it's excellent. It's excellent. I had a great time with the Lone Star Ranger, so I assume that this is amazing, The Last of the Dwaynes, when I get to it. So yeah, book number 51, The Lone Star Ranger. The next book I'm going to be reading is also for June on the Range, and that'll be my Louis L'Amour book. This is Flint, Louis L'Amour's Flint. I'm actually going to be doing a slightly late TBR for June on the Range. That'll be my video for tomorrow. I probably won't actually read all the books on my TBR, but I will be reading from those books. And the next one I'm going to be reading is Flint. This is, you know, a typical Louis L'Amour short Western. His Westerns aren't very long usually. There are a couple of exceptions. So it shouldn't take me that long to read this. I'm hoping that this upcoming week isn't awful. So we will see. So I am going to read that next for the book that I read. But that's not all I read this week. Last weekend, after I filmed my weekend reading report, I read something for my Astounding Science Fiction project. I read the Astounding Science Fiction project, for those of you who don't know. Every month I'm reading an issue of Astounding Science Fiction magazine from 1951. They're a little out of date. So I'm reading Astounding Science Fiction magazine every month from 1951. And for May, this is the May 1951 issue of Astounding Science Fiction magazine. Inexplicably, this is just in amazing condition. I don't know that anybody ever read this until I read it last weekend. But yeah, so Astounding Science Fiction magazine from 1951, 25 cents. The cover illustration is from the Galactic Gadgeters by Harry Stein. And on the back, what is this? I think it's some sort of language thing. What is this? Learn another language. Go places. Learn another language. Easy, quickly, naturally by Linguaphone. Linguaphone, the world's standard conversational method. So, you know, you can learn another language with Linguaphone. It's Linguaphone. So there you go. At least it's not Dianetics. It's usually Dianetics on the back of these Astounding Science Fiction magazines. And here's the contents page right there. Let's see what we have in here. What did I read this week? There were some good stories in this one. There was Galactic Gadgeters by Harry Stein. Izzard and the Membrane by Walter M. Miller Jr. Those were the novelettes. They were novelettes. They were really just, they didn't seem like novelettes. They seemed just like short stories, but they were novelettes. Then the short stories, we had Success Story by Julian Chain. Julian Chain wrote Success Story. Guess Again by J.A. Meyer. Key Decisions by H.B. Fifth. And then we had some articles. Clipper Ships of Space by Russell Saunders. That was interesting. And the Argon Heavy Water Reactor. Boy, that was just a thrill a minute. Let me tell you. So, I don't think I had ever read any of those stories before. So it was kind of like just being there in 1951 reading these stories, which, you know, I've never read. I don't remember reading these before. Galactic Gadgeters actually seemed kind of familiar, but yeah, probably not. But anyway, that's the cover illustration for Galactic Gadgeters. That's pretty cool. One thing I love about reading these old science fiction magazines is being able to see some of this old artwork from the magazines. It's really cool to be able to do that. There's Izzard and the Membrane. So it was good stuff. It was good stuff in this issue. I really enjoyed this one. It was cool. So yeah, I read this last weekend. I always seem to wait till the end of the month to read my Astounding science fiction magazine. So, you know, I will take some time out in June to read the June issue for 1951. So, yeah, there was that. I read that. Also, I finished The Dark Knight Archives Volume 1. This was the first 4 issues of Batman, because for my World's Finest project, where I read, well, my World's Finest challenge. It's a challenge to read Batman and Superman every day of my life, no matter how terrible it is, and I've had some terrible days lately. No matter how terrible it is, I'll read Superman and Batman. That really wasn't very tough. I could have spent all this week just reading Superman and Batman. Actually, I probably should have just done that. And this had the first 4 issues, so finished with that. I'm almost finished with the Golden Age Superman Omnibus Volume 1. I should be finished with this by tomorrow. This is interesting. In both, I've noticed, you know, in the older issues of the Golden Age Superman and Batman, they were both like killing folks. Superman was tossing people through, you know, 100 miles away and knocking down planes out of the sky. Batman was like shooting people and hanging people. It was, well, he hung one big monster from his plane, I think, if I'm remembering right. It was very violent. And now we're at the point where they're no, we don't kill anybody. So as these characters became more popular, the publishers pulled back on that whole, you know, kind of pulp hero style killing. And they're becoming more like the Superman and the Batman that we know, the less violent kind. And I should be done with this by tomorrow. Yeah, by tomorrow I should be done with that. So then I'm going to move on with the World's Finest project. The next thing for Batman I'm going to read is this. This is Batman Year One by Frank Miller. I'm going to read this. So I wasn't a huge fan of The Dark Knight Returns when that came out. But I read this as it came out. This was actually published in the regular Batman comic book, 4 issues, Batman Year One. And it was fantastic. I remember buying these issues and just being like, wow, this is great. It was great. I remember this being a great story. I haven't read it for a while. So, yeah, Batman Year One is the next thing I'm going to read. I'll get back to the Golden Age Batman and Superman eventually, but I'm going to, you know, mix it up a little bit. So going to the 1980s with Frank Miller's very dark Batman Year One. And like I said, I remember it being really great. And this is, I think, the first hardcover edition that came out. This is the first hardcover collection, I think. I think I bought it that long ago. The next Superman thing I'm going to read is the final volume of the Man of Steel. This is from the John Byrne era, when John Byrne revamped Superman. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, there he is kissing Wonder Woman. Scandalous. And we've got a little bit on the back with Supergirl. Can't be the real Supergirl, can it? I mean, Supergirl was killed during Crisis, and John Byrne did not bring her back. So I don't remember that part, but actually, yeah. Oh, now I do. Okay, this is the okay. I remember this version of Supergirl now. Now that I'm thinking about it, I do remember this version. So I'll read the final volume of The Man of Steel, John Byrne's era. And it does have some cool stuff in here. There's some cool stuff in here. So, yeah. I'll read that for Superman. I did get some things. That showed up here at the Manor. My good friend Doug sent me this, and so I'll be reading this for June on the Range this year. This is To Be a Man by William Decker. And Louis L'Amour has a little blurb here where he says, "Excellent, this is the real West," says Louis L'Amour. So it's got to be great. And another way I know it's great is because this copy is really worn, like right there, right where you would put your thumbs when you were reading it. So it makes me think that this copy has been read like 1,000,000 times, which is a good sign. If a book is read that often, it's probably a really, really good book. So To Be a Man by William Decker. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Thanks, Doug, for sending me this. I just got this today. It was very exciting. So this will probably be the third Western that I read for June on the Range. I have a few things to read. So I'm hoping I get more done in the very near future. We will see.
Okay, I also got this in the mail, which I forgot to mention initially because it was behind me on the bookshelf. But this is Landon Connor's Occult Detective, Volume 1 by Bob Freeman. Now, this is a book by a booktuber. Bob Freeman is a booktuber. I will link his channel down below. And this book looks really cool. It's got a really awesome design, which Bob Freeman did. This is over 500 pages of occult detective supernatural adventure. I like the logo. That's pretty cool. Again, Bob Freeman designed that. And here is the man himself right there, looking all awesome. Bob Freeman, here to help you with all your occult detective needs. And yeah, this is a thick book. It looks really cool, and I really look forward to reading this.
I also got some Batman stuff in. I got Batman Eternal, which I've never read. This is actually from the New 52 era. I remember Batman being like the one decent thing from the New 52, and then it kind of took a turn also. But I haven't read this one. I have no idea whether it's any good or not, but it sure looks cool. It sure looks cool, so, you know, I'll get to this eventually. Batman Eternal, Volume 1. I got that, and perhaps more exciting than that, definitely more exciting than that, to my mind, is Batman Showcase Presents Volume 2. Batman Showcase Presents Volume 2 with the Silver Age Batman. And so these stories start when? 1965, and they go all the way to... So it's 1965 through 1966. So a bunch of stories from Detective Comics and Batman Magazine. This is, you know, these showcase volumes, like I mentioned last time I got one of these, they're all in black and white, but they're really cool. They're really cool. I love these showcase volumes. A lot of stuff was printed in these showcase volumes that have not been reprinted in any other way, because DC, man, DC is finally coming out, though, with Superman and Batman in Silver Age omnibuses, so maybe they'll get around to Hawkman, maybe they'll get around to the Atom. Let's hope. Let's hope. Aquaman. Poor Aquaman still doesn't have a Golden Age or Silver Age omnibus. Where's Aquaman? Gotta print some Aquaman. So, I got that. We did get some Epic collections this week, Roger. I gave you trouble for not getting any last week, but I got 2 of them this week, and they're both pretty exciting. I think so anyway. Steve Donahue, if he watches this, is just going to be groaning through this whole next section. Then the first Epic collection I got was this. This is Star Wars, the original Marvel Years, Volume 6. So finally, in the Epic format, Marvel has published all of its original, weird, very strange, very goofy Star Wars series. This had some weird stuff in it, the original Star Wars series from Marvel, as you could probably guess from that cover. So this has issues 89 through 107 of Star Wars. This era of Star Wars towards the end was not my favorite. Some of the artwork just didn't really work for me. Cynthia Martin did a lot of the artwork in these issues, and her artwork, it's not terrible or anything, but it just doesn't feel like Star Wars to me. It's just a little, doesn't really work for me, but it's weird, and you know, so it fits right in with Marvel's Star Wars. That's true. Now, another cool thing about this is that it has Star Wars issue 108, which was published in 2019 by Marvel. And what they did in issue 108 is it was a return to that continuity. This is the cover from issue 108. It returned to that Marvel continuity, the original Marvel continuity with some of the original characters, including the big bunny rabbit. I think the big bunny rabbit has got to be in here, right? See now? Oh yeah, there he is. There's Jax. I think his name was Jax, the big bunny rabbit. He comes back in 108. This is actually a much better final issue to the original series than issue 107 that actually finished the series. I remember this because I read it, and yeah, it's cool. I'm really glad they actually included that with this Epic collection, because it deservedly so. It should be in there. So yeah, the last of the original Marvel years in Epic format. Even more awesome though is Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos Volume 2. It took forever for this to come out. I think we got Volume 1 of Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos like 3 years ago or something crazy. It's been a long time. And so finally they said, oh, we should come out with a Volume 2. So here it is, Sergeant Fury and the Howling Commandos by Stan Lee. And I think all the artwork was by Dick Ayers in this one, right? Well, Stan Lee and Roy Thomas wrote it, but all the artwork in it was by Dick Ayers. And Stan Lee and Dick Ayers were both World War II veterans. And so that explains the tremendous realism that you'll get in Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. I mean, it's just, it must have just been like being there in the war. It's so realistic and gritty. Yeah, so that's cool. I was really happy to get this. You know, for BookTube at War in July, I could just read comics. I've got so much war comics now. 2 volumes in Epic collections of Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. But I'll probably read Sergeant Rock, because frankly Sergeant Rock is better. But I was very happy to get that. And I think that's everything. I think that's everything this week. This god-awful, terrible week we just had. Next week I hope to read a little bit more. Catch me tomorrow when I have my late. June on the Range, TBR, where I talk about the books I've settled on. And later this week, I've got Epic Comic Book Wednesday, where we're talking about Alex Ross and Marvels. That's going to be amazing. You should all watch that. Epic Comic Book Wednesday. It's the best thing I do. And then on Thursday is the much belated, the first 50 books I read for the 500 book challenge. I am also behind on doing my video for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club from last month, 3 Imposters. That'll be up next month. Next month. That'll be up next week. I'm just so far behind on stuff. I'll get them all out. Okay, guys, we'll catch you next time.